This is Marianne Kedron. I'm part of the Black Rock Riverside Alliance, and we're doing conservation conversations this morning. Our guest is Sandra Smith from the Buffalo Niagara River Land Trust, and this is being brought to you by the generous donation of the Paul and Helen Ellis Charitable Trust. So let's begin our conversations by saying good morning to Sandy. Good morning, Sandy.
Hi everyone. Glad to be here.
Great to have you with us. Let's start with the most basic question. What is the Buffalo Niagara River Land Trust?
So the Buffalo Niagara River Land Trust is a nonprofit, and our mission as a land trust is to acquire, remediate, and manage potentially contaminated lands in the Lake Erie, Niagara River, and Lake Ontario corridor and their tributaries. And the mission is to to contribute to ecological protection and also to improve public access to the water and the waterfront through these spaces that were previously degraded and previously contaminated and rehabilitated through steps that we can talk about in a little bit. The vision of the Land Trust is not only to acquire and remediate these parcels in isolation, but ultimately to work to try to create a truly connected system of public waterfront sites and ultimately provide for new passive and active public access sites all along that river and lake corridor.
When we think of land trust, we don't typically think of people who are going to remediate land. How unique is that for the Buffalo Niagara River Land Trust?
So this is a very unique situation, particularly given the legacy of use of our waterways and historic contamination of shoreline sites. For as much water as we have here in Western New York, a lot of it is inaccessible, in part due to infrastructure and choices that we've made along our shorelines, but also just because of these contaminated properties that have been used and misused over time. So the goal of the Land Trust, as we were saying, is not just to acquire these pristine properties, right? It is to acquire sites that need work, right? Sites that have had a legacy of contamination on them. And we are willing to do the work and find funding and figure out ways to remediate these properties so we can return them to the public good.
So how is this, how do you see this impacting our communities along Northwest Buffalo, Riverside and Black Rock particularly? I know we have a project that's being worked on in the neighborhood.
So our flagship property, so to speak, of the Land Trust is 1660 Niagara Street, which sits basically at the confluence of Scajaquada Creek and the Black Rock Canal. It is a really important cornerstone property to the cleanup of the Scajaquada Creek corridor, which directly impacts the Black Rock Riverside community. And also one of the very few access points that ultimately, once we do cleanup, will allow people to fish and to launch kayaks and to enter the larger space of the Niagara River corridor through that doorway. I think that it's, when we think about the renaissance in Buffalo that we've been undergoing, just sort of as a larger community, there is no coincidence that the renaissance downtown was directly related to the cleanup of the Buffalo River. So I think that the more that we as a community are able to identify and acquire properties, clean them up, and encourage folks to come to the water, that's how we do it. And so I think that it is. It will provide, as we continue to identify and acquire properties, we will be able to not only connect communities to the water, but also connect communities and the folks that live there to each other.
Sandy, you mentioned an interesting comparison to downtown. Do you ever see a time where the work that the Buffalo Niagara River Land Trust is doing would conflict with industrial development or economic development, or do you see it being more synergistic?
Idealistically, I'd love to say that I see it being synergistic. I hope that, it's my hope that we would be able to work in concert with all of the things that are happening, and alongside with industry and the Harbor Development Corporation and everybody who has an interest in those, in the shoreline areas, downtown and all along the corridor and in our watershed. Cool.
Tell me some other things about the Buffalo Niagara River Land Trust that nobody knows. I mean, it's a relatively new group, so I think we are much more familiar with other groups.
It is. And so, I think what's really neat, as we brought up earlier about this organization, is unlike any other most land trusts, right? We seek out properties that need help. Right? We seek out properties that have been formerly degraded. The remediation piece is interesting. I think one of the neatest things about the land trust in general is the kind of diversity of backgrounds of our board, right? We have engineers, we have folks in real estate, we have attorneys, I'm a teacher. And so we have a really neat, I think, just cross-section of folks who are working on, everybody brings a different skill set to the table, right? And I think that allows us to very comprehensively dive in to this mission of, first of all, like evaluating properties. Second of all, figuring out strategies for acquiring them and figuring out what that looks like from a legal standpoint and from, those sorts of perspectives. And then overseeing all the remediation, right? Which is where we really get down and dirty, and we leverage relationships with construction companies and, state and federal agencies and environmental engineering firms, right? And then there's the management piece, right? Thinking about these lands in perpetuity, right? And how are we going to be stewards of these lands going forward? So the most fun part for me of being involved in this group has been just that really cool cross-section of folks from lots of different places and lots of different professional backgrounds, all with a passion for doing this kind of work.
I know we've learned a lot about the DEC and the forestry groups and things like that you wouldn't necessarily even think about impacting this community because we're such an urban environment. But they do play a role, and they're in our community quite often doing monitoring, and I'm hoping to speak to them in this series as well, because I don't think people recognize the work that they do in cities.
Right. I would agree with that. And, and I think a lot of people, when they're driving around in Western New York, you see all these brownfield cleanup signs, right? And you see these, these just indicators of work being done. But most people who live here don't necessarily have an idea of the kind of work that's happening. Exciting stuff that's happening with the Tonawanda Brownfield Opportunity Area, right? At Tonawanda Street. And the work along Niagara Street, right? It all connects, and it is, again, it is this partnership, this hopefully synergistic working relationship between all of these organizations.
Do you see a role or a place for young people in this?
Absolutely.
As a teacher, you can speak.
Definitely. I think there's a couple ways that we can work with and empower kids, right? I think that the kids are obviously the future of our communities, right? And the decisions that they're going to make are going to be the future of all of our communities. And so empowering them with the understanding of where we live and the resources that we have here, and the history of, this rich history of our relationships with our resources. I think that's really important. I think it's not just about getting kids to help with cleanups. It's about using our resources to educate them. It's a context, right? It's talking about science and history and language. And really, as I don't want to overuse the word empower, but it's about empowering these kids with an understanding where they come from and an understanding of these resources that they have this relationship with. And then they're going to want to come out and clean up, right? Then it's not just showing up to pick up trash, right? It's true stewardship. It's true service learning.
So if anybody wanted to either contact this group or figure out how to become more involved, how do they do that?
So we just launched our new website at www.bnrlandtrust.com. And on there, you can see the names of the folks who are on the board. You can see what we're up to, the projects we're working on, and there are also a couple links for contacting us either as from a volunteer perspective or from a contribution perspective, or if you just want to learn more or are interested in becoming a board member.
Okay, we're trying to keep these conversations relatively quick. So do you have any final words or anything you'd like to say to the general public?
No, I'm just, again, it's really wonderful to have the opportunity to share our work. And I think that it's my hope that in the coming months and years that as we acquire more properties and start to get rolling on some new and exciting work, that you'll be hearing more from us. And we look forward to hopefully at some point bringing the fence down at 1660 and inviting everyone down for a, for just an introduction and a better and just sort of a larger conversation.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.
My pleasure. Thank you.